President-elect Obama ran, of course, for office on the message of change. So flatly, how on earth does keeping the current Secretary of Defense equate with change? Bob Gates has only served President Bush since December 2006, but he was the first Bush's last director of Central Intelligence, and he was what might be called an accessory to Iran-Contra. All that could be plenty to upset the Democratic base, as one former Clinton official told Mark Perry of the Asia Times when he heard about the mere possibility of keeping Gates in office, quote, "The election was a clean sweep, and that includes Bob Gates. It's called a change in government." We're joined now by Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation magazine. Chris, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you, Keith.
To the point of that former Clinton official's name or unnamed point, how is, you know what I mean, how is Obama going to reconcile that the campaign message change with, at the Pentagon, absolutely no change whatsoever, same guy from the key reform, if you will, guy from the Bush administration?
Well, I think in some ways that ship has already sailed. I mean, even before we got to Gates, it was already clear when you're talking about people like Lawrence Summers, when you're talking about Senator Clinton at State, it was already clear that change was not being conceptualized from the perspective of the Obama people as a massive sort of clean slate sweeping of the personnel, that we're going to essentially see a lot of familiar faces. Gates is the most acute example of that because, as you know, he's actually a Bush administration official. But we've already kind of been introduced to that, so there's nothing disruptive about this specific instance. What's disruptive is getting one's head around what role personnel is going to play in the administration generally.
Many on the left have said they don't care who the appointee is so long as they carry out a policy that Obama puts in place. Is that likely to be the main reaction to this news? I mean, this is obviously not a surprise, but here it is apparently in stone.
I don't know what the main reaction is going to be. I do think that that's true. Look, progressives, people on the left, we care about outcomes, right? We want peace, we want security, we want justice, we want broadly shared prosperity. These values are what's driving people's concerns, and seeing an administration that implements policies that further those values is ultimately what it's all about. Right now, we're kind of guessing in the dark. Everybody's sort of reading the tea leaves because they're worried about an administration that doesn't pursue the policies and the outcomes that we want to see. And so I think everyone would agree that if Robert Gates is the man to end the war in Iraq and bring our troops home and manage a successful and peaceful transition out of occupying that country, then people aren't going to care that it's Robert Gates. The question is, is that policy going to be what's pursued? And there's reasons to start worrying that it won't be.
In addition to the Gates announcement, we're getting word today that John Brennan had withdrawn his name from consideration as director of Central Intelligence, and that was seen as a victory for those on the left because Brennan had not spoken out forcefully on torture. Is there just a coincidence here? Is there some mitigation of Gates by the Brennan sort of withdrawal? Is there sort of a tit for tat on this?
I don't think it's that. I mean, I would be surprised if it were that thought out. I do think that the Brennan withdrawal is a good thing, and I do think that, again, I mean, it's easy when we start thinking about, because we're a little bit in a kind of a dark space right now in terms of what actual decisions are going to be made by the administration because they're not in power yet. It's easy to read a lot into personnel, but it's important from this sort of perspective of core values that someone who is not sufficiently outspoken in denouncing the torture regime was not allowed to be, part of the administration's efforts to sort of transition into in the intelligence agencies. So I think, again, that reaffirms something that's a sort of core principle, but I don't think it's useful to see it as a kind of tit for tat, that the left wins one victory and maybe loses something on Gates.
Is there overall insurance for Obama in having suggested that he would be bipartisan, certainly putting out feelers and hints that he would try to be bipartisan in office, that here is a shining example of that? You're putting as important a role as you could have in the hands of somebody who literally does trace back to Iran-Contra?
Yeah, look, strategically, and I'm speaking purely strategically here, the most charitable interpretation, I think, of Obama's strategy vis-a-vis personnel early on is a kind of sort of co-opting, embracing of the establishment. Now, the establishment in Washington, D.C. is very strong. It has, and I think that there's an awareness of how strong it is, and that might prove to be useful going forward.
Chris Hayes, the Washington editor of The Nation, tonight's representative of the angry left. Thanks, Chris. Have a good weekend.
I'm so not angry.
Yeah, I know you're not. That's what I'm saying. It's sort of that was irony. I'm not pulling it off well tonight. Have a good weekend if we don't talk.
You too. Happy holiday.